Ritika, and this is my first video. To be honest, I'm feeling quite weird and nervous at the same time because people don't talk much about it, but talking to a camera really makes you feel insane. I mean, the room is empty, but मेरे को तब भी थोड़ी सी शर्म आ रही है. But keeping all this aside, giving you just a gist about this video or this channel, I would be uploading stories. I know there's nothing new about it, but there are few stories that have really stood out to me, and I feel like talking is something that I really enjoy. Be it a camera, be it a person, I enjoy talking in general. So let's see how it goes. I'm looking forward to uploading really nice videos with really amazing and intriguing stories. So, getting straight into the story, I'll be reading out a short story. It's called Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl. I remember reading this when I was in class 11th or 12th. It was part of our course, of our English course, and I was really touched by the story in some way. I would say it really stood out to me, the characters, and I'm excited to tell you guys about the story. So, let's get into it. The room was warm and clean, the curtains drawn, two table lamps alight, hers and the one by the empty chair opposite. On the sideboard behind her, two tall glasses soda, water, whiskey, fresh ice cubes in the thermos bucket. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again she would glance up at the clock, but without anxiety, merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it nearer the time when he would come. There was a slow, smiling air about her and about everything she did. The drop of the head as she bent over her sewing was curiously tranquil. Her skin, for this was her 6th month with child, had acquired a wonderful translucent quality. The mouth was soft, and the eyes, with their new placid look, seemed larger and darker than before. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen. A few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the tires on the gravel outside, the car door slamming, the footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She laid aside her sewing, stood up, and went forward to kiss him as he came in. Hello, darling, she said. Hello, he answered. Okay, so I forgot to mention that Patrick worked for the police as a detective, and this is an important point which will be required further ahead in the story. So, as Patrick was there back in the house, there was something weird about him, quite unusual than what he usually did. And Mary did notice this, being the wife. So, usually on Thursdays, what they used to do was they used to go out to eat, and Mary wouldn't cook, and it was like the ritual thing, like a date night thing. How cute is that? But it was Thursday that day, and she asked whether Patrick would like to go out to eat with her, but he was acting quite weird. He didn't answer. But there was a breeze of uneasiness around them. So, if you're too tired to eat out, she went on, it's still not too late. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer, and you can have it right here and not even move out of the chair. Her eyes waited on him for an answer, a smile, a little nod, but he made no sign. Anyway, she went on, I'll get you some cheese and crackers first. I don't want it, he said. She moved uneasily in her chair, the large eyes still watching his face. But you must have supper. I can easily do it here. I'd like to do it. We can have lamb chops or pork, anything you want. Everything is in the freezer. Forget it, he said. But darling, you must eat. I'll fix it anyway, and then you can have it or not as you like. She stood up and placed her swing on the table by the lamp. Sit down, he said. Just for a minute, sit down. It wasn't till then that she began to get frightened. Go on, he said. Sit down. She lowered herself back slowly into the chair, watching him all the time with those large, bewildered eyes. He had finished the second drink and was staring down into the glass, frowning. Listen, he said, I've got to tell you something. What is it, darling? What's the matter? He had become absolutely motionless and he kept his head down so that the light from the lamp beside him fell across the upper part of his face, leaving the chin, mouth in shadow. She noticed that there was a little muscle moving near the corner of his left eye. The amount of detailing given by Roald Dahl is just amazing. This is going to be a bit of shock to you, I'm afraid, he said. But I've thought about it a good deal and I've decided the only thing to do is tell you right away. I hope you won't blame me much. And he told her. It didn't take long, 4 or 5 minutes at most. She sat very still through it and watching him with a kind of dazed horror as he went further and further away from her with each word. So there isn't any mention of anything of what he exactly said, but it must be revolving around something including cheating or like he's leaving her or something like that. So there it is, he added. And I know it's kind of a bad time to be telling you. I mean, of course, she's pregnant. But there simply wasn't any other way. Of course, I'll give you money and see you looked after. But there needn't really be any fuss. I hope not. Anyway, it wouldn't be good for my job. Audacity. Her first instinct was not to believe any of it, to reject it all. It's very nicely written here. It occurred to her that perhaps he hadn't even spoken, that she herself had imagined the whole thing. Maybe if she went about her business and acted as though she hadn't been listening, then later on, when she sort of woke up again, she might find none of it had ever happened. I'll get the supper, she managed to whisper, and this time he didn't stop her. She walked across the room and couldn't feel her feet touching the floor. She couldn't feel anything. I mean, of course, she must be in such a severe shock. So everything was automatic now. Down the stairs to the cellar, the light switch, the deep freeze, the hand inside the cabinet taking hold of the first object it met. She lifted it out and looked at it. It was wrapped in paper. So she took up the paper and looked at it again. A leg of lamb. All right then, they would have All right then, they would have lamb for supper. She carried it upstairs, holding the thin bone end of it with both her hands. As she went through the living room, she saw him standing over the window with his back to her. For God's sake, he said, hearing her, but not turning around. Don't make supper for me. I'm going out. At that point, Mary Maloney simply walked up behind him, and without any pause, she swung the big frozen leg of lamb high in the air and brought it down as hard as she could on the back of his head. She might just as well have hit him with a steel club. She stepped back a pace, waiting, and the funny thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds, gently swaying, then he crashed to the carpet. The violence of the crash, the noise, the small table overturning, helped her bring her out of the shock. She came out slowly, feeling cold and surprised, and she stood for a while blinking at the body, still holding the ridiculous piece of meat tight with both hands. All right, she told herself, so I've killed him. It was extraordinary now how clear her mind became all of a sudden. She began thinking very fast. As the wife of a detective, she knew quite well what the penalty would be. That was fine, it made no difference to her. In fact, it would be a relief. On the other hand, what about the child? What were the laws about murderers with unborn children? Did they kill them both, mother and child, or did they wait until the 10th month? What did they do? Mary Maloney didn't know, and she certainly wasn't prepared to take a chance. She carried the meat into the kitchen and placed it in a pan, turned the oven on high, and shoved it inside. Then she washed her hands and ran upstairs to the bedroom. She sat down before the mirror, tidied her face, touched her lips and face. She tried a smile. It came out rather peculiar. She tried again. Hello, Sam, she said brightly aloud. The voice sounded peculiar. I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of potatoes. That was better. Both the smile and the voice were coming out better now. She rehearsed it several times more. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, went out the back door, down the garden into the street. It wasn't 6 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the grocery shop. Hello, Sam, she said brightly, smiling at the man behind the counter. So she bought some potatoes and cheesecake from the grocery store and she made it look as normal as possible. While she was returning back to the home to her husband who was waiting for his supper, mind you, she wasn't expecting to find anything. She was just going home with the vegetables. Mrs. Patrick Maloney going home with the vegetables on Thursday evening to cook supper for her husband. That's the way she told herself. Do everything right and natural. Keep things absolutely natural, and there'll be no need for any acting at all. Therefore, when she entered the kitchen by the back door, she was humming a little tune to herself and smiling. Patrick, she called. How are you, darling? She put the parcel down on the table and went through into the living room. And when she saw him lying there on the floor with his legs doubled up and one arm twisted back underneath his body, it really was rather a shock. All the old love and longing for him welled up inside her, and she ran over to him, knelt down beside him, and began to cry her heart out. It was easy, no acting was necessary. A few minutes later, she got up and went to the phone. She knew the number of the police station, and when the man at the other end answered, she cried to him, "Quick, come quick, Patrick's dead." "Who's speaking? Mrs. Maloney?" "Mrs. Patrick Maloney." "You mean Patrick Maloney's dead?" "I think so," she sobbed. "He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead." "Be right over," the man said. Point to be noted, the first thing that should come up to a woman who has just seen his husband lying on the floor would be to call an ambulance. But who did she call? As I read further, the car came very quickly and she opened the front door. Two policemen walked in. She knew them both. She nearly knew all the men at the precinct. And she fell right into Jack Noonan's arms, weeping hysterically. He put her gently into a chair. Then Jack Noonan went over to join the other one, who was called O'Malley. The officer was kneeling by the body. "Is he dead?" she cried. "I am afraid he is," said the officer. "What happened?" he asked. Briefly, she told her story about going out to the grocer and coming back to find him on the floor. While she was talking, crying, and talking, Noonan discovered a small patch of congealed blood on the dead man's head. He showed it to O'Malley, who got up at once and hurried to the phone. Soon other men began to come into the house. First a doctor, then two detectives, one of whom she knew by name, then a police photographer, and also a man who knew about fingerprints. There was a great deal of whispering and muttering beside the corpse, and the detectives kept asking her a lot of questions, but they also treated her very kindly. To reconfirm the story told to them by Mary Maloney, they sent one of the officers to the grocer's shop to ask him whether Mary Maloney actually went to the grocery store or not. Later, the officer who was sent, came back and confirmed that Mary Maloney did went to the grocery store to buy some potatoes and cheesecake, and Sam confirmed that everything looked normal about Mary Maloney. As the investigation proceeded, Mary was quite adamant in staying in the same room where the investigation was going on. Jack Noonan asked her several times whether she wanted to shift to some other room inside, or he could also drop her to his own house where she could stay with his wife. But she insisted on sitting exactly where she was till she felt a little better, so they did not bother her again. Sometimes Jack Noonan spoke to her gently as he passed by, or they would ask her one or two questions here and there. They also told her that her husband has been killed by a blow on the back of his head with something that was very heavy and blunt, certainly a large piece of metal. They were looking for the weapon. The murderer may have taken it away with him, but on the other hand, he may have thrown it or hidden it somewhere on the premises. "It's the old story," said one of the officers. "Get the weapon and you've got the man." Later, one of the detectives came up and sat beside her. Did she know, he asked, of anything in the house that could have been used as a weapon? Would she mind having a look around to see if anything was missing? A very big spanner, for example, or a heavy metal vase. They didn't have any metal vases, she said, or a big spanner. She didn't think they had a big spanner, but there might be some things like that in the garage. The search went on. She knew that there were other policemen in the garden all around the house. She could hear their footsteps on the gravel outside. It began to get late. She noticed the time by the clock. "Jack," she said. The next time Sergeant Noonan went by, she asked, "Would you mind giving me a drink?" "Sure, I'll give you a drink. You mean this whiskey?" asked Jack Noonan. "Yes, please," said Mary Maloney, "but just a small one. It might make me feel better." He handed her the glass. "Why don't you have one for yourself?" she said. "You must be awfully tired. Please do. You've been very good to me." "Well," he answered, "it's not strictly allowed, but I might just take a drop to keep me going." One by one, the others came in and were persuaded to take a little sip of the whiskey. They stood around rather awkwardly with the drinks in their hands, uncomfortable in her presence. Imagine what an awkward situation that must have been. A dead man with his wife and his colleagues were drinking in his presence. Not in his presence, he was dead, but like, what an awkward situation. Trying to say, and they were also trying to say consoling things to her, making it more awkward. Okay. Sergeant Noonan wandered into the kitchen, came out quickly, and said, "Look, Mrs. Maloney, you know that oven of yours is still on, and the meat's still inside." "Oh, dear me," she cried. "So it is. I better turn it off for you, hadn't I?" "Will you do that, Jack? Thank you so much." When the sergeant returned the second time, she looked at him with large, dark, tearful eyes. "Jack Noonan," she said. "Yes, would you do me a small favor? You and these others?" "We can try, Mrs. Maloney." "Well," she said, "here you all are, the good friends of dear Patrick's too, helping to catch the man who killed him. You must be terribly hungry by now, because it's long past your supper time. And I know Patrick would never forgive me, God bless his soul, if I allowed you to remain in this house without offering you decent hospitality. Why don't you eat up that lamb that's in the oven? It'll be cooked just right by now." "Wouldn't dream of it," Sergeant Noonan said. "Please," she begged, "please eat it. Personally, I couldn't touch a thing, certainly not what's been in the house when he was there. But it's all right for you. It'd be a favor to me if you'd eat it up. Then you can go on with your work again afterwards." There was a good deal of hesitating among the four policemen, but they were clearly hungry, and in the end they were persuaded to go to the kitchen and help themselves. The woman stayed where she was, listening to them through the open door, and she could hear them speaking among themselves, their voices thick and sloppy because their mouths were full of meat. "Have some more, Charlie?" "No, better not finish it." "She wants us to finish it. She said so." "Be doing her a favor," one of them said. "Okay then, give me some more," said another one. "That's the hell of a big club the guy must have used to hit poor Patrick," one of them was saying. "The dog says his skull was smashed all to pieces, just like from a sledgehammer. That's why it ought to be easy to find." "Exactly what I say. Whoever done it, they're not going to be carrying a thing like that around with them longer than they need," one of them belched. "Personally, I think it's right here on the premises. Probably right under our very noses," one of them said. "What do you think, Jack?" And in the other room, Mary Maloney began to giggle. That's the end, guys. Also, what really stood out to me was the fact that no one in their wildest dreams would have suspected a 6 month pregnant woman would be able to carry what we call the perfect murder. I mean, right from the beginning, the author has also done a great job in showing us all these emotions that were inside of Mary Maloney, right from the beginning, starting with the love that she had for the husband, so pure. Which was later turned into suspicion and then shock and then rage at its full form. That was, and very quickly after that she transformed into this really witty woman who meticulously carried out set up this whole thing where she made it look like she was not there when the murder happened. And I mean, being in that frame of mind, it's really difficult to be this quick with the thoughts and all. And uh, I just love how Roald Dahl has showcased Mary Maloney as this really powerful woman, powerful in a way, but the actions are not justified, but the way she acted it out was really commendable, I would say. I mean, she made a fool out of those detectives who were in the department, who wouldn't have ever suspected Mary Maloney to be the killer in the end, and how she got them also involved in the crime. If later anything happens, like if later they get to know about it, they eventually indirectly they are also part of the crime because they have helped indirectly helped Mary Maloney in getting rid of the weapon because they ate the meat. So with this we come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Very soon I'll be coming up with another video. Till then, take care. Bye bye.